had someone ask me to put a video up explaining why it's important to change the strings on your bass. And I'm going to say that it's going to be really the same reasons you change the strings on your bass and your electric guitar, acoustic, whatever. The main reason I change my strings is because of the sound, because of the tone. See, I like on the bass, I like a really bright sound. One reason is because Steve Harris from Iron Maiden has a very bright sound to his bass. I like that clack sound. The longer you have your strings, the more you play, the more dirt and grime that you get building up in the strings, on the strings, the more the life of the string goes away. So I'm just going to turn the tone knob off on the bass. Turn off the volume knob. There we go. This is like an exaggeration, but this is kind of like what happens. Like you lose brightness, clarity, and whatnot of the string. So hopefully you can hear a big difference between that and that. So like the longer your strings are on, the more they start to lose their clarity, their brightness, their life. Other reasons why, I mean the same thing with guitar, the more you play the strings, the more life goes away from it. They start to become dull. The tone isn't as good. Another reason why a lot of times when the strings get old, they don't want to stay in tune so well anymore. So they get to this point where they're just not cutting it anymore. Well, that's one thing that happens with a lot of my students is they say, you know, like, I need to change my strings. This thing won't stay in tune anymore. So and a lot of times it might be a year in between string changes. But I do know some bassists, I can't remember their type of string, but they like to have, they like a dull sound on their bass, so they like it when their strings get really old. However, if you're like me and you enjoy the brighter sound, the more aggressive punch, then yeah, it's important to change your strings quite often, especially if you play a lot. If you're playing a lot, like every day, to really maintain the sound of those strings, I mean, at least a month at a time. I admit I'm quite lazy when it comes to changing strings because I just don't like doing it. So it might be a few months before I finally change strings. If I'm about to start recording a new song or get a new project going, I'll typically put new strings on at that point because I want to have the best sound come through on the recording as possible. Trying to think of any other really big reasons, but I think it really covers it right there. So I mean, the biggest thing is the strings sound better when they're new. They stay in tune better. I mean, it takes a little bit to break the strings in. That's very true. But then after, you know, several months go by from a lot of playing, then the strings may not want to stay in tune so well anymore. So yes, it is important to change your strings. How often? It's really up to how much you play. So let's go into more detail about that. How often should you change the strings? Like I said, if you're playing every day, you know, like a couple hours a day, if you really want to have the best sound, you can. I'd say like every month. The beginning of every month will produce that. I know for a lot of professionals who do a lot of shows, they'll actually change their strings before every show to maintain the best possible sound. I know Steve Harris, again from Iron Maiden, he definitely has his strings, you know, new strings every show to really have the best sound possible. And I remember in one interview, or not an interview, like documentary, they're talking about how if they're playing in like a really hot environment, like a festival during the day, like the bass sound will actually change because of all that heat will actually kind of mess with the strings, and some of that brightness and clarity will be gone by the end of the show. So professionals change their strings much more often. If you're only playing as like a hobby, maybe like once a week, a couple times a week, you can definitely get away with, you know, several more months. I think a year, you're cutting it as far as like, it's like after a year, yeah, change the strings. It sound a lot better. You might enjoy playing a bit more too. So, hope that answers any questions you may have about why you change your strings, how often, and if you have any questions about this or anything with music at all, please let me know. Thank you for watching.